So what are the best exercises when it comes to getting a six-pack? Now, this is a very common question, and a lot of people sometimes struggle with exactly what is the most effective way when it comes to training your abs. So today, I want to give you my opinion on the type of exercises that you should be doing more of when it comes to getting a six-pack, and the ones that maybe you don't really need to be doing, that a lot of people do spend time doing, which is kind of just a little bit of a waste of time. So first of all, when it comes to getting lean and seeing your abs, this isn't going to be something that's going to happen unless you have the fundamentals in place first. Like, you can train abs multiple days per week, you can train them daily. You're not going to see a difference unless you're lean enough. So this is the first thing that you have to sort out. You have to make sure that you're in a calorie deficit. You have to be consistent. You have to make sure you're consuming enough protein. You have to be making sure you're lifting weights. When you do these things consistently, you're going to see you start to drop body fat. And over time, you'll start to see that your abs are going to appear and you're going to get closer to that lean physique that you've always wanted. Now, when you get close to this stage and you're on the right journey and you start seeing a difference, that's when I think it's a good time to start maybe bringing in a few ab exercises which can definitely help. Now, you want to think of your abs like any other muscle. If you do train them progressively, they're going to thicken, they're going to become more defined, and you're just going to have a better, kind of stronger core, and they're just going to look a little bit better than maybe if you didn't train them. Now, you can still get a six-pack without training them, and I spent a long time not really ever training my abs, and they've always still stayed there, they've always been there. However, I do recommend potentially just giving your abs only 2-3 sessions a week and training them in a specific way that I'm about to explain to you now. So let's get into it. So what wouldn't I do when it comes to ab training? Now, to start with, I wouldn't be doing tons of bodyweight exercises. I wouldn't be doing these 10-minute ab workouts at the end of your sessions that you probably seen on YouTube. You see one of your favorite influencers post about. You need to actually train them smart and in a way that you would train any other muscle group. Doing hundreds of sit-ups excessively every morning or when you go to the gym, all that's going to do is it's just going to completely wreck your back. This has literally been shown that doing this movement, doing these sit-ups excessively, it just puts so much pressure on your lumbar spine and your discs that you could potentially lead to having some issues. And especially if your form is pretty poor, which when it comes to sit-ups, a lot of people do sometimes struggle with, which I know it sounds like a very basic exercise, but it's still one that people do often get wrong. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do tons of crunches. You don't want to do tons of these like bicycle movements. All that is not really going to get you a six-pack. You need to make sure that you train them in the most effective and the most proper way. Now, these are the two biggest movements that you need to focus on when it comes to building a strong, defined six-pack and actually starting to see a difference and really thickening these muscles. Now, this is going to be hip flexion and torso flexion. Now, these two movements are as follows. One is when you bring your chin down to your belly button. This is known as torso flexion, where you're almost in this crunching movement. The other one is going to be bringing your knees up to your belly button. This is going to be known as hip flexion. This is been shown to hit your rectus abdominis, your abs, the most effectively when it comes to really seeing a difference in here and building up the thickness in these muscles. I would focus more on this than our side muscles here, things like our obliques. We don't really want a massively thick waist. We want to just focus on our core, these muscles here, which are going to make up our six-pack. Now, when it comes to hip flexion and torso flexion, this is going to pretty much come down to two very simple movements. The first, let's say hip flexion, this is going to be something like a hanging leg raise or hanging knee raise or something that requires you to bring your knees up to your belly button. Now, my go-to is going to be a hanging leg raise. I find that these I always find challenging. I find you can progress on them, and I just find they're a fantastic exercise when it comes to rebuilding your core. You can do knee raises, you can bring your knees out to the side. There's different variations of this exercise that you can do, but each one is going to be effective in terms of actually working the right parts of your abs. And this is going to really hit your lower abs as well, which is obviously a slightly more difficult muscle to sometimes focus on. So you need to make sure that you're doing a good amount of hip flexion within your training. I'd recommend doing maybe 3 sets of hanging leg raises, 3 sets of knee raises. And if you really struggle with these exercises, then you can actually start from just doing like a bodyweight leg raise. So lying on your back, bringing your feet up to the top. This is still a great way to work and do the same movement, but it's just a more of a breast movement. When you can actually perform a hanging leg raise without any swinging, that's when you can start to progress on it over time and start to do more and more and more. I still find that I would hit failure at around like 12 to 15, sometimes slightly more when it comes to hanging leg raises. I can't do loads all in one go, which means I can still apply progressive overload to this exercise over time, which is the key when it comes to training your abs. So that's the first movement, hip flexion. Make sure you do this and make sure you have part of this in your workout routine. The second movement is going to be torso flexion. So this is basically mimicking a sit-up movement, but instead of doing a sit-up, which you can probably just bash out maybe maybe 30, 40 in one go. I could probably do 100 sit-ups and I still 100 crunches, maybe not so many sit-ups, and I could still probably end up doing more. It's just something that I find pretty boring and I wouldn't enjoy doing that over time. So instead, we want to focus on ways in which we can add weight to this movement, something that we can actually do progressive overload with, again, which is just a much better way of stimulating our muscles. We've got to think of our abs like any other muscle that we want to train. If we want to build a bigger chest, we'd probably aim to do maybe like 3 sets of 8 to 12, and we try and progress on that movement over time. That's what we focus on when it comes to building any other muscle. So this is the same when it comes to training your abs. So what we want to focus on when it comes to torso flexion is we want to do things like weighted crunches. We want to use the rope, and we want to crunch in this position, or we want to use the abdominal machine, and again, do that same movement. With this movement, this is much more effective because you can actually start to add weights to this over time. You can start to progress, you can start to put the pin down. It's exactly the same like training any other muscle group. Your abs are going to start to get stronger and get thicker, meaning it's just much easier to be able to progress and see a difference in these movements. It's not as boring, it's less time as well because you're actually able to fail in a smaller rep range, and this is just a much more effective way of training them. So you want to do movements like a weighted crunch, potentially using an ab machine. These are the best ways in which you're going to be able to focus on those kind of movements. And that is pretty much it, guys. When it comes to training abs, you just want to keep it dead simple. These 2 movements progressed over time within your routine, that is really all you need to do. You don't need to be training your abs that much to see a huge difference. If you did these 2 things and you maybe try to add this to either 2 to 3 of your workouts per week, you're going to see a massive difference. That's typically what I'll do. I'll train pull on a Tuesday and I'll add some abs into that exercise or that movement into that day. And then on a Thursday, I'll typically do a cardio workout, and then I'll also add some abs into that too. And then sometimes on a Sunday, I'll go and do a little bit more abs at the end of the week as well. So it's typically 2 to 3 days per week. And I follow that exact workout split. I literally make sure that I follow hip flexion and torso flexion, those 2 movements, and I pretty much just aim to progress over time on them. And this would typically take me maybe around like 15 minutes at the end of my workout, sometimes not even that, 10 minutes. And I just bolt them onto the end of my big workouts. And that is literally it when it comes to training abs. Don't overcomplicate it. I keep it super simple. And I just make sure I'm consistently doing that over time. Now, naturally staying lean through my diet, moving, keeping a good body composition, keeping it a weight, I will always be able to see my abs anyway. This is just something that's going to help keep them nice and defined and just almost allow me to maybe be a slightly higher body fat percentage, but still have a really thick, pronounced core just from training them in that particular way. So I hope you found this video useful. That is literally all it comes down to when it comes to ab training. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't buy into the gimmicks or the ab workouts that you might see on here. Body weight isn't really going to be very effective for most people looking to train their abs. Maybe if you're just starting out, but as you start to progress over time and become more experienced, you need to add progressive overload into this. And these 2 movements are going to be the key way of doing that. So make sure you hit subscribe for more fitness content. Make sure you like this video, hit the bell notification, and I'll catch you in the next video.